Welcome to Leaving Academia, Becoming a Freelance Editor. I'm your host, Paulina Cossette. What do you do when the academic job you worked so hard for starts to feel like it's costing you too much? In this episode, I'm joined by Jenn McClearen, a former assistant professor who walked away from a nearly complete tenure file at the University of Texas and moved to the Netherlands to build a business that honors her values. Jenn is now a writing coach and developmental editor who helps early career scholars overcome perfectionism, procrastination, and fear of criticism, and reclaim writing as a joyful, sustainable practice. We talk about the mindset shifts that helped Jenn leave academia, how she built her business around care and consent instead of hustle and hierarchy, and why marketing doesn't have to feel gross when you lead with your unique qualities. If you're looking for a way to use your academic skills without sacrificing your well-being, this episode will open up a new path for you to pursue your dreams. I hope Jenn's story shows you that finding joy outside the academy is possible, not just for her, but for you too. To find out how to do it, go to acadiaediting.com/become an editor. Now, here's my interview with Jenn.
Welcome to Leaving Academia, Becoming a Freelance Editor, the podcast. I'm your host, Paulina Cossette. In 2019, I was a political science professor who was fed up with the stress and hostility of academia, not to mention the low pay. I left my tenure-track job and went from barely surviving to thriving as a freelance academic editor. Today, I own Acadia Editing Services, an editing and coaching business that brings in 6 figures a year. In this podcast, I'll discuss the challenges of academia, what academic editing involves, and what life as a freelancer looks like. If you're willing to jump outside your comfort zone, it is possible to find joy, true flexibility, and a profitable and rewarding career as an academic editor. Thanks for listening. Hi, Jenn. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you today.
So you are speaking with us from where you live in the Netherlands, and you are a scholarly writing coach. Tell us about what you did as an academic and how you discovered the editing and coaching world.
Sure. Yeah, happy to. So I got my degree at the University of Washington in communication and media studies. My first job out of grad school was working at the University of Texas. My first 2 years there, I was a lecturer, and then I got hired into an assistant professor role. And so I spent 7 years at the University of Texas. I was about to go up for tenure this past year. My file was almost complete. My recommenders had already been accepted, that they were ready to read my file. And my partner and I said, you know what? We don't want to live in Texas anymore. And this had been culminating for several years in that I really actually loved my position. I had great colleagues. I felt intellectually I fit in the department. I feel like they protected me as a junior scholar. And I wasn't overwhelmed with service work. I felt good at work overall for the most of that 7 years. And then towards the end, Texas started, the state of Texas started getting really involved in the institution. It's always been really involved in the University of Texas, but I felt like I was working for the state of Texas instead of the University of Texas. And politically, obviously, I didn't align. Well, not obviously, but obviously to me, I did not align with their politics, and it was getting worse and worse. They got rid of DEI before the United States did. They were attacking tenure. They continue to do that. And, now that I'm gone, and I just decided that I didn't want to be geographically stuck. I had applied for other jobs elsewhere, and I just wasn't finding anything that was a good fit geographically and institutionally. And I was of the mindset forever that, academia was it. This was my dream job. And I really felt like I got my dream job. But then over time, my dream job wasn't really the dream anymore. And I craved having geographical flexibility. And my partner also had moved with me to Texas, never felt at home in Texas, probably had a harder time than I did even. And we just decided, you know what? I'm not gonna cement my tenure file, and we are going to move on. And in the process of that, I had started a newsletter on Substack called Publish Not Perish, and I had built up a following, and I shared writing advice and had kind of developed a nice community there. And at first, it was a way to sort of just share my learning and experience. And then over time, I started thinking, well, maybe I could build this into something that I can carry with me anywhere I go. So I won't be geographically bound anymore. I won't be beholden to an institution that I don't share the values with. I get to set my own values as an entrepreneur and say that this is what my business stands for. And that was very freeing. And so we did it, and we I resigned from UT in April. I finished out the semester in May. And then in July, we moved to the Netherlands, and we've been here ever since.
That's so exciting. As you're talking about what was going on in Texas, it makes me think of Florida, which was my home state. I live in Maine now, but I grew up in Florida. I got my PhD at the University of Florida. I taught in Jacksonville before I moved to Maryland for a couple of years. And I remember back in like 2016, 2017, of course, I was teaching US politics, so that was fun. I could see everything like ramping up, it was just, or rather, academia was crumbling. And I think I got it earlier than people in other departments because of the subject matter. But now seeing what's happening in Florida all along the same lines as what you described in Texas, it breaks my heart, because the university was so fantastic and so many students were getting such fabulous experiences and starts in life. And now everything is just turned sour, And so, so it's unfortunate, and I'm not sure how we're going to find our way out of it. But so how did you tell us more about, you said you started this Substack. Tell us more about how you figured out that this could actually be a business.
Yeah. I think when I originally started Publish Not Perish, I was thinking of ways to be of service to the profession that didn't require me to go through to traditional avenues of the university, so that I would have more ownership of it, and that I could share what I had learned along the way around writing barriers like procrastination and perfectionism and imposter syndrome, and how all of that can really slow down the writing process. And also bits and pieces about navigating the academy, because the academy is not transparent. Learning how to write in the academy is not taught usually methodically. And so a lot of people are kind of fumbling around in the dark. And I had during my graduate career, I had sort of went on this professional development pursuit to try to figure out how to overcome my own writing barriers and work through it myself. And so I had a lot of passion around making things easier for other people. I didn't want it to be so hard learning how to write like an academic, or managing one's career, like time management and all of those things that go into it. And I just wanted it to be easier for others. And I wanted to have control over what that was going to look like. And so that was the origin of it. And then I was also of the persuasion until only a few years ago that business meant exploiting people and being profit oriented only, and being exploitative in a lot of ways. And I was one of those academics that thought academia was somehow different from that, and it didn't also do all of those things to people. And then I started paying attention to other types of businesses that are out there in the world that are human-centered or environment-centered and have values and beliefs that move society forward rather than just profit. There's a purpose-drivenness to these types of institutions. And I thought, it never occurred to me to try to be an entrepreneur, even though like if I took some sort of, checklist test on whether or not I should be an entrepreneur, I would probably say yes, because I like having a lot of agency and I like driving forward my own projects and doing those sort of things. But I just thought that business wasn't for me. And then I realized that actually in the business world, there's a lot of people doing a lot of work for good. And where I was seeing the University of Texas and other institutions within the academy failing so badly in terms of how they're dealing with human beings, I thought, well, there's a better way potentially for me through an entrepreneurship route where I got to define the values that I stood for. And hopefully by defining those values that I stood for, it also attracted people that believed in the same sort of things that I did and wanted to proceed within the academy if they wanted to continue in the academy in the ways that were more sustainable and more healthy and more just better for them as human beings overall, that would be a way that I could go. And so I started paying attention to different people who were running their own businesses, like Laura Portwood Stacer, she was my developmental editor back when I wrote my book. And of course, I talked to her and had conversations about what her experience was like. And then I started looking at other people who had built businesses to try to figure out, kind of what was going on and how they had developed their businesses. And I took a course called Marketing Like We're Human, which really aligned with all the things that I was saying about doing business differently, because marketing in that realm of things is about communicating and not just trying to sell something for the purpose of gaining money, but that money is a transaction between people for things of value, and that's okay. So that was really helpful too. And I started listening to a lot of podcasts about business to try to, figure out, okay, what does this even look like? How do I market my business? What does this whole world look like? And so I, in true researcher fashion, I started researching effectively and thinking about what other people were doing and what I most would like to do, as opposed to, I didn't want to do it the same way I did academia, which was figuring out how other people wanted me to do academia, how you're supposed to do academia. When I started this career, it was, all right, there are lots of different ways to do this and to do this well. How do I do it in a way that aligns with who I am as a human being and what I value?
There's so much in what you just said that I think is so important for people to hear and is just so fantastic. So I was actually going to ask you how you learned marketing, because I looked at your website and it's absolutely fantastic. And I'll come back to that in a minute. But what you were saying about your initial feelings and thoughts about business was exactly how I grew up. I always saw business as the enemy and as, greedy and corporate and selfish and self-interested. And so I too never thought that I would be an entrepreneur. I think there was also an element of thinking like, I couldn't ever do that. I didn't have the skills or the knowledge, like thinking that you have to have an MBA to run a business. And it wasn't until I started freelance editing and realizing that other editors out there didn't just work for editing agencies or publishers and, taking whatever scraps they send our way, but that they actually went out and they attracted their own clients and they charged really good money and they were able to have a really good living while also helping other people. And that's, I think, for me, when that perspective shifted, and I too started listening to podcasts. I listened to a lot of Amy Porterfield and other, particularly women business owners who, it's just a very different environment today, I think, and I don't think it started necessarily with the internet. Like you were saying, there are businesses that are more environmentally focused and social justice focused, but I think the internet has allowed people like us to be more successful, that when you're not starting a restaurant or something, you don't have to have a business loan. You don't have to, have all this knowledge about licensing or anything. You just take your expertise and you create a website and you learn the other pieces along the way. I also thought it was really interesting what you said about how really academia is more like the sinister element here, that like academia is really taking advantage of people and not paying people what they're worth, and is more closely tied to capitalism than the types of businesses that we run now. So that's an interesting point to make too. Coming back to, you mentioned that you took a marketing course. Was this like a digital course all online, and it showed you what are the kind of things that it taught you that you thought were most important?
Yeah. So Marketing Like We're Human is the title of the course. And Sarah Santacroce is the sort of person who developed the course. And she also wrote a couple books. There's Selling Like We're Human, Marketing Like We're Human, and she has a new one called Business Like We're Human. So I found her podcast and really aligned with some of the things that she was talking about, because she had that same ethos of, we are here to do good in the world. And so marketing is about communicating and finding the people that align with the mission that we have and the values that we have. And so instead of starting with going out and being like, okay, who is the niche that I want to serve? It's more about communicating your worldview and who you are and what you bring. And because, there's a lot of editors and coaches out there, but it's also communicating how you do specific ways that you do things and how that aligns with particular values. So a lot of when I'm coaching, a lot of what I say is, for example, I'm always going to place your humanity first. So I'm never going to tell you to do things that are going to put other things that maybe, like, to not put your family first, for example, or to not put other things that you value first, if that's what you prioritize. And, things like rest and sleep and all of those things. So that's part of the ethos of care that I bring to my work. And you can see it in my newsletter, and you can see it in my coaching and the people that I work with. And I think that's why, because that's the message that I send out to the world, I attract people who align with that message. And so part of what I learned through this marketing course is that you can market with your worldview, and you don't have to be shy about, separating business and politics if that's the type of people that you want to attract. And so that was very freeing for me, because it felt like, because I attached marketing to, again, to businesses that are just trying to sell and to exploit, then to shift and to think about marketing as communication to explain to people how you might approach working with them, and how you might uphold their, honor their values and honor them as human beings, then that is, that's going to attract the people that want to hear that and want to work with someone like that. And I just find that very freeing and refreshing, because again, I don't have to think of business in a way of, just being after profits or something like that, and not thinking about the humanity of the people that we work with.
And I think that's another striking contrast with academia, is that we are sort of forced in academia to serve on this committee, or, even be in this department, or, supervise this student. And the relationships can often be really tense, because you're working with other people who are challenging or unkind or abusive or whatever. And in business, it's so freeing, I think, because like you're saying, you attract people who are like you, or people who are attracted to your message and your style and personality. But also, if somebody who's not a great fit does contact you, you can always say, sorry, I'm booked. My schedule is full, or whatever. And so I find that just so rewarding. I think I had a Zoom call with my current becoming an academic editor cohort this week, and they were a little bit scared of, like, what if somebody, contacts me and I don't want to work with them? And I said, don't work with them. Like you get to choose. It's like you choose your own adventure. You get to choose whatever direction you want to go in business and who you want to work with and all of that. So it is a really freeing experience. So tell us, so you moved to the Netherlands, you started the business. Tell us what that process was like. How did you decide on your services and what you're offering, and what does the business look like today?
Yeah, sure. So I started working one-on-one with coaching clients at the very end of my time in Texas. So I think I finished my last course in April, and I took on a few clients in May and in June, knowing that I was going to be moving to the Netherlands in July, and that I was going to take a couple weeks there, and then needed to adjust to moving to a new country and like uprooting my entire life and my job and my career and everything else. So I basically had a soft start, and then I decided to take on a few clients and one-on-one coaching, but not really kind of try to ramp up the business until I had a chance to process the move and to get settled a bit. But when I arrived here, part of the process, the visa process that I was on, was I needed to establish the business and get all the paperwork going. So I did all of that in terms of because I had to officially. I technically am a sole proprietor here, but here legally you have to register that business with the government. Whereas in the States, if you're a sole proprietor, you kind of just do your thing and report your taxes just like they're any other taxes. It's not like set up like an LLC. That's a totally different designation. So I started with coaching initially just because I thought, because I'm transitioning, it's going to be easier to do one-on-one than to do some of the other things that I had planned eventually. And my goal was to always develop a course. So in addition to doing one-on-one coaching, eventually I took Amy Porterfield's Digital Course Academy and designed a course that was going to distill a lot of the things that I found that people were coming to me for in the one-on-one coaching. And so I developed a course called Flourish, developing or cultivating a sustainable writing practice. And it really is about overcoming some of the challenges of navigating a very full schedule and being charged with writing research projects, but not really having the time for it, and not being given the space in the institution in order to be able to do that. You're supposed to just kind of figure it out along the way while having a heavy teaching load and have a heavy service load and everything else on your plate. And so I wanted to develop this course always because I like the energy of a group. Even though one-on-one is really great, I find that I really enjoy them one-on-one as well. And in a lot of ways, one-on-one, you can do a lot more with a person. It's more intensive, and you can kind of narrow down to the specific challenges they're having and develop individualized solutions for them that are generated from them. So it can be a really fulfilling process, and I really enjoy that. But having a course also makes some of these concepts and some of these strategies a lot more accessible, because one-on-one coaching is more expensive than taking a course would be. So they get a lot more content. So I always wanted to work towards that, even though I was doing one-on-one coaching. And I kind of, everyone gives you the business advice that you should niche. But part of what I wanted to do too was to try several things and figure out what I liked doing. So I didn't want to niche too early into saying I just do one-on-one coaching and I coach around this specific topic. And so I kind of spread it a little bit more widely. And then I also started doing some developmental editing because I found that some of the barriers and some of the challenges that come up for people in coaching, which is really more where my heart is, are manifesting in the writing. And if I can also do developmental editing, then it creates like a more holistic way to help them with some of the challenges that they're facing. Because if someone is sort of feeling timid and insecure in a coaching session about whatever topic that they're talking about, a lot of times you can see that timidness and that insecurity show up in their writing. And so it's a way to kind of address it more holistically. And so I've been doing that as well. And it was really, again, I didn't actually market the developmental editing. I just kind of put it on my website and was like, oh, people will come to me if they want to find me. And that's been good because I've been kind of able to kind of dabble in it to decide if I enjoy doing it and how much I want to do it in my business. And so that's something I'm still kind of working out because I know I don't want to do developmental editing for like all my services, but I do like having it being a part of the coaching. And so that's something that I've learned in the process. So I would say right now my offerings are one-on-one coaching, developmental editing, preferably with the coaching aspect connected to it. And then I have this course that I'm planning to run. I ran it for the first time starting in February, and I'm going to run it again in the fall.
And does the course is there a live component or is it videos or how does that work?
There are 2 tracks. The first track is all asynchronous, except for 4 Q&As that are spread over the 10 weeks. And then there's also like a discussion board. And so there's like an interaction that's happening, but it's primarily asynchronous. And then the synchronous portion gets access to all the asynchronous parts. And then we meet once a week and alternate between group coaching and co-writing. So that kind of flip-flops every week so that there is a group component, like a live component that I offer too. And that was really, the design of that was really because I wanted to give people options in terms of how much they were engaging and how much time they were contributing. And then also, of course, the group component is a higher price. And so it gives different access points for people.
Yeah, that makes sense. I find a lot of, particularly academics, I think, and certainly this was true for me when I first learned about the coaching and online course world. I think people are really surprised at what courses can cost. You know, I've been experimenting with what you're describing, like having different tiers and price points. But when you realize from like the instructor side how much time you're spending, whether it's weekly coaching, answering questions, emails. I have a Slack channel for my group where I'm in there every day answering questions. It really fills up your time. And so it can be a bit challenging. I've found to strike that balance for what is fair for me, but what's also doable and fair for the client.
Well, also, so we think about it because we're instructors, right? That we came out of the academy where we know what it takes to build a syllabus and we know what it takes to deliver a course. So when you are your own business owner, on top of that, you have to do all the marketing, which is a lot of work because you don't, like as a university instructor, you don't do any marketing for your course. You write up a description, send it out to the university. The students decide which courses they're going to take or which courses they have to take. So there's none of that involved with it. And then also on top of that, you have to pay for your own tech stack. So you have to pay for Zoom. You have to pay for whatever calendar scheduling app you have. You have to pay for, I'm editing my own videos. So I'm also paying for a video editing software. I'm paying for the course platform. Instructors don't have to pay for Blackboard or Canvas or any of those other things. So there's so many things as an individual entrepreneur that your university would just automatically have. Even your email service, like you have to pay for your Gmail email service or whatever email service that you have. Like all of that requires and that eats into, that increases the overall cost of your course, not to mention like your intellectual labor and time that goes into it. So if you've never done it before, you wouldn't really understand like, well, where did this price tag come from? But it's because there's so much that goes into it.
Yeah, thank you for outlining that. It really does. And I'm always somebody who tries to be as frugal as possible. But yeah, it was like for me, it was one thing to be an editor, right? When you're editing, you have to have a computer with Microsoft Word and probably a website, which is relatively inexpensive, a couple $100 a year if you're, want to have the bells and whistles on it. But yeah, when I moved into the course space, it really ramped up with the marketing. Like this idea of passive income is sort of a joke, like you don't just create the course and then it sells itself. It doesn't work that way. You have to be constantly telling people about it and promoting it and marketing it. And yeah, and you need, like what you just described, you need all those tools, which end up being thousands of dollars a year, on top of the amount of time that you're spending, and putting into it. So yeah, creating the course was super easy. I had done that a million times, but it's like all the stuff that comes after that is really challenging. So what kind of authors do you typically coach, and what are some of the challenges that you see with them and that you help them work on?
Yeah. So I would say the vast majority of clients that come to me fall within the early career scholar range. So that's from PhD candidate to, several years into their assistant professorship. And so it might be people who are trying to get writing publications out before they go up for tenure. I would say my newsletter is kind of marked. I didn't really design it that way, but that's primarily like a lot of people that are attracted to it. And so those are the people that tend to seek me out. And I work with them around a few different areas. Usually they're coming to me because they intellectually have the content. They know that they need to write. They have their projects. And so it's not the content. They come to me as a writing coach because they say things like, I need to get this, I need to get going on this book, and I just cannot find the time in my schedule. I don't know how I can prioritize this because I say every week I'm going to write and then I can't find the time for writing. Or they'll say things like, when I first started grad school, I thought I was a pretty good writer and I enjoyed writing. And then somewhere along the way, my confidence was completely shattered because I experienced rejection or I experienced harsh critique. And now writing is a scary thing. And I cannot seem to make myself do it. I want to procrastinate all the time because it feels so hard. So they'll come to me with things like that. Oftentimes it has to do with figuring out how to fit it in their schedule, or it has to figure out, or there's something around trying to figure out how to make it happen when there's other barriers in the way. And so in coaching, what we do is we start with, okay, what are your goals for coaching? Because we always set that up in the very beginning. It's not therapy in that we're not just going to talk about it and sort of process it, but we are going to use the information that we learn to figure out how you're going to proceed. How are you going to meet those goals? It's very client driven in that I ask a lot of questions and I help tease out the goals, but I'm not ever setting the goals for them. I'm not ever telling them what they should or shouldn't do. I'm rather helping them, guide them to what they actually want to do in order to solve the issue or meet the goal that they're trying to get to. So let's say if it's about fitting writing into their schedule, we might start talking a lot about what are your priorities. So where does writing fit in your priority schedule? And where does responding to emails quickly, where does that fall in your priority schedule? And do we need to shift that? If you're just constantly always responding to emails right when they come in, that can really hinder your progress in your writing. So if we shift the priorities and focus on what's important and start divvying up your time in ways that reflect those priorities, and then giving less effort to things that are less important. So it's a process of, we go through every week or every time that we meet. Usually I start with, how things were going from the last time that we met. And then I'll ask them, okay, what is your goal for this session? Like, what do you want to accomplish by the end of the session? And so usually it's working through some sort of challenge that they face and trying to meet that overall goal. And we come up with a plan to try to help implement for the next couple of weeks until we meet again. And then again, we reflect and we assess how that went and then keep moving forward. So it's very, very goal driven, which is really nice because I think people can make a lot more progress in a shorter period of time because we're able to kind of hone in on what those challenges are. For example, a lot of times when I find writers are having a hard time writing, is because they are stuck in this mode of when they put something on the page, they're already thinking about the critic, and they haven't even decided what they think about the thing that they're trying to put on the page. So one of the things that we often work on is trying to figure out how to reframe their audience and reframe the stages of writing so that there's distinct writing to think stages and distinct writing to communicate stages. And so you're not really thinking about your critics until you're writing to communicate. And that really frees up the writing space. So if people can come to that realization, that one realization can really free up and get people unstuck in ways that they might have been stuck in writing for years. And I've seen it happen over and over again. And that's a really beautiful thing that, can come more quickly through that one-on-one interaction. Whereas in a course, sometimes it takes a bit longer to get to that same level of clarity. You can get there, and courses are great, and I definitely use those. I think it's a great tool as well. But sometimes the one-on-one is able to kind of pinpoint where those hangups are, the things that get in the way of meeting your goals, so that you can work through those and then develop a plan that better gets you towards your goals.
Yeah, I love that. As you were talking first about, the challenges that people face with writing, I was remembering all my writing anxiety, publishing anxiety. I think I went through something similar where writing was always very easy and I loved it. But then, you instead of thinking about just writing a good paper, you're thinking about, oh, what is everybody going to criticize me for? I think that's probably pervasive throughout academia. But it's almost like you get this anxiety that's created within you because of this fear of criticism. And I see that a lot in people in my program who they're going out to start this business, and I have to keep reminding them, like, the world out there is not like academia, sure, there are people who are not very nice out in the world, but usually, like we said earlier, the people you attract are looking to work with you, and they're looking for support, and they're kind, and they're not going to abuse you the way that you were in academia. So then hearing you talk about your process made that anxiety dissipate, and I was feeling very calm. One of the things I love about coaches is that we are allies, we are non-judgmental supporters. And I feel like people in academia just don't have that. Like, no matter who you go to for help, you're always worried that they're going to, think negatively of you or critique you or whatever. And a coach just opens up that space for you to be who you are, to write what you want to write, and not worry about the feedback, because that even if they have constructive criticism, they're going to deliver it kindly and in a way that's seeking to help you. So that's fantastic. So as you're describing the coaching process, I wonder, was there any training or experience in academia that you feel like helped prepare you to be a coach? Are there any skills or experiences that you had in academia that really make you well suited as a coach?
Yeah, I think my dissertation advisor actually was a fantastic mentor, and she was kind and still is, she's still here. And she is open and generous and offers advice, but isn't necessarily going to, isn't going to pressure you into taking that advice. And I think from that moment, when I had that sort of experience, I knew going into working with graduate students that I was going to take that same approach, because those were primarily the people that I was going to be working with in terms of mentoring and coaching in academia. And I learned a lot in the process of really letting people be who they're going to be. Like you were saying a minute ago about what a coach does is they're not going to tell you what to do or who to be or what to value. Rather, they're going to help draw that out, what you already are and who you already are, and just help affirm that. And I feel like I got that early on, but then I leaned into it a lot more because I had a lot of graduate students that had different experiences than me. and they had different challenges than me. And so there was a lot of listening and trying to figure out how to guide them in a way that was true to them, and that wasn't just because mentoring, and it's true, or it's sort of most stereotypical terms, is telling you how I did things so that I can, guide you in the path that I did. But where coaching differs from that is really trying to help guide the person into who they want to be by asking the right questions at the right time. And I feel like I was prepared for that because I had good models, but I really kind of leaned into it more. And I also took a coaching course that was through the International Coaching Federation, which is very much leans heavily into the idea that you are not a consultant, you are not a therapist, you're not telling people what to do. Rather, your job is to set up a structure and have accountability and help them define their goals and reach their goals through strategies that align with who they are and how their brains think and things like that. And so I think that having a good role model early on opened that door for me. And then over time, I've developed it even more.
So how do you think most of your clients are finding you nowadays?
I would say that it's either through Publish Not Perish, or now it's through referrals too. So people that have worked with me, or I have worked a lot with Laura Portwood Stacer, and she generously sends clients my way if they are looking for coaching, or just even I have coaches that are on my mailing list through the newsletter, and sometimes for whatever reason they can't work with the client and they'll send people my way. So I think primarily it's through the newsletter. I'm also building a separate email list because Substack, like all social media platforms, has some political issues. And we never know when, some tech billionaire is going to take over the platform. So I also want to have my own email list that is mine, that I am not connected to another platform to, just to kind of protect myself a little bit. So I'm also building up that. And that's primarily, there's a lot of overlap between the two. I don't have a lot of people that are not on both. But yeah, I think that's been primarily the way that I've found people. I haven't got a lot of traction on other social media platforms, even though I've dabbled in doing stuff on Instagram, like I post occasionally now, and I've dabbled on LinkedIn, but I don't know if that's really where I'm getting my clients from. I think it's primarily through the newsletter, and people will share the newsletter. And also the SEO is picked up on the newsletter more. So people will find me kind of randomly by searching for things, and they'll come across the newsletter. So I think that's been the primary thing. And then referrals are probably secondary at this point.
Yeah, the importance, I think, of the email list is great to highlight, because I think isn't it Amy Porterfield who says, don't build your house on rented land or something, that like we get so caught up in followers on social media. And first of all, just because they're a follower doesn't mean they're going to buy from you or hire you. But then also all of that can be gone in an instant if the platform shuts down, or if they decide they want to cut you off or whatever. So it's great to have your own list that you can communicate with people whenever and however you want.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here and for sharing this insight and your journey. I think it's really inspiring to hear how, you decided that the job that you had in academia, even though there was a lot you loved about it, it wasn't working for you anymore. Living in Texas wasn't working for you anymore, and that it's okay if that happens to somebody, because we have very little control over the politics, and things are getting pretty extreme. It's not like, 20 years ago or something. And so if that happens and you're no longer happy where you are, it is okay to leave academia and prioritize the rest of your life, your partner, your children, your, wherever you want to live, whatever that looks like for each person. And so thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. This was a great conversation and I've really enjoyed it. And it was nice to reflect on my experience. So thank you for that.
And if people want to get in touch with you, how can they find you?
Sure. So my website is jenmcclearen.com, and that's Jen with two N's and then MCCLEAREN. And then my newsletter is publishnotperish.net. So I think either avenue is a great entry point into me and what I do. So yeah, looking forward to connecting.
Great. Well, thanks again, Jen. It's been fun.
Yeah, thank you.
If you're unhappy in academia and you think you might be a good editor or writing coach, check out my course, Becoming an Academic Editor. This digital course is paired with a 12-week group coaching program to support you through your decision to leave academia or not, and to start building a profitable and rewarding academic editing business. Learn more by going to acadiaediting.com/become an editor. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time.